Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This Shabbat, we are blessed not only to be celebrating Sienna's bat mitzvah and celebrating Shabbat, but we have a real treat in store for all of you and our guest speaker, Rabbi Matthew Gewirtz. I want to read a little bit of Rabbi Gewirtz's bio and then share a personal piece as well. Rabbi Matthew Gewirtz began his tenure as the senior rabbi of Congregation B'nai Jeshurun in July of 2006, B'nai Jeshurun of Short Hills, New Jersey. Previously, he served as senior associate rabbi of Congregation Rodef Shalom. He earned his master's in Hebrew literature from Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in 1996, and he was ordained by HUC-JIR in 1997. A strong advocate of social justice, Rabbi Gewirtz was a founding executive committee member of the Newark Coalition for Hope and Peace, which was an interfaith organization of Jews, Christians, and Muslims that is committed to ending gang violence in Newark. Rabbi Gewirtz has served for the past 4 years as the president of the Coalition of Religious Leaders, CORAL, for the state of New Jersey. A regular contributor to numerous professional publications, including the CCAR Journal, the American Rabbi, and the Wisdom Daily. He is the author of The Gift of Grief, Finding Peace, Transformation, and Renewed Life After Great Sorrow. That was published by Random House. His second book, which he's here today to talk about, To Build a Brave Space, the making of a spiritual first responder, has just come out. Rabbi Gewirtz is a fellow at the National Jewish think tank Klal. He appears as a regular commentator on religion on MSNBC's Morning Joe and CNN's State of the Union. He has co-anchored and started his own television series as a tri-anchor of PBS's NJTV, A Matter of Faith, with an imam, bishop, and a rabbi. Rabbi Gewirtz is married to Lauren Ruckin, a philanthropy advisor. They are the proud parents of Jake, Natalia, and Sadie. Rabbi Gewirtz is also an ardent fan of baseball and football, and he roots for the Mets and the Jets, and serves on the Newark Museum Council. This was such an impressive bio until the Mets and Jets part, Rabbi. I mean, it's like, keeps going higher and higher, and TV and impressive things and Random House, and then Mets and Jets, and it just all fell flat on that. I'm sorry. I'm going to talk about something from sports, and as a Mets and Jets fan, you will not have any appreciation for it for 1 minute, which is the very best teams and coaches in sports have players on the field and coaches on the sidelines that are always thinking 2 to 3 plays ahead. So that when the first batter is in the batter's box, they're thinking about how the third or fourth batter is going to do. And when it's first down, they're thinking about the play they're going to run on the next set of first downs. That's the kind of rabbi Gewirtz is. He is a rabbi's rabbi. I first met him in 2006 during a war in Israel, in which we both were on the New York Board of Rabbis emergency mission, trying to give physical and moral support for the war that was happening in Lebanon. We were by far the youngest people on the trip. He had been the rabbi at his synagogue for about 7 minutes by the time he arrived during that summer. And we created a quick bond, and I realized in that moment that there is really something special with this person. And since that time, I have watched and tracked his career, seen him on television, read his many articles, and each time I am buoyed and inspired by his insight, his thoughtfulness, his compassion, and the way he is grounded both in what we're dealing with in reality today, but also what Judaism has to say to give a thoughtful, creative, and meaningful answer to these challenges that we're facing. And you do it in such a natural, reflexive way, Rabbi, that it's really a gift to not only your congregants, but to so many other people who you touch and who are blessed to call you their friends and call you their teacher. Rabbi Gewirtz has also spearheaded a program with other rabbis that's thinking about now what? Now that the pandemic is over, now that the topography of the Jewish world has begun to change, what are the next steps that we take as a Jewish community? And just someone who thinks on that level is unique enough, but someone who can think on that level and then take the action plan and start to put the rubber to the pavement on such an issue is really what leadership is all about. So on behalf of all of us who are blessed to learn with you and to learn from you, we thank you for your leadership. We thank you for this amazing book that you have written and inspired with, and we are so honored to have you with us for this Shabbat. It is my great honor and great pleasure to invite forward my friend, my colleague, and our guest speaker for this Shabbat, Rabbi Matthew Gewirtz. First things first, we have a gift that we give to all of our guest speakers at our synagogue, and it is a kippah that's made in Israel to match the dome that is over us. It's a dome for your dome from our dome. Thank you. And we hope you wear it with happiness, with peace, and with health for many, many years to come. And when you do, that you always think about your connection to the synagogue. I would be remiss if I also didn't mention, where is Toby Glazer? Where are you, Toby? I saw you come in.
Back there.
There you are. So your partner in crime, Rabbi Karen Perelman, is married to Toby's daughter, Liz. So it's like we're here, it's like family, connected on another level. So it's good to have you here celebrating with us and with Rabbi Gewirtz this Shabbat. Mazel tov on this book. Very, very exciting. I've been watching you make the rounds on it. What caused you to write this book, this title, and now?
So first of all, thank you for having me here. Your introduction would make my mother of blessed memory be so happy. So, that time in 2006, it was an immediate connection. And we used to both spin at Flywheel. I don't think it's around anymore. And that same teacher would teach up here that taught in Milburn. And she was like, you are one and the same. You are the rabbi up there, and he's the rabbi of down here. So it always feels good to be associated. So I wrote the book because I was, frankly, utterly exhausted. Exhausted by the polarity in this country, exhausted by the fact that we can't have conversations anymore without trying to put down the other. It stopped being about civility. It started becoming about rancor that I think is fraying the fabric of this country. So on one particularly down moment, I was changing planes in an airport, and someone sent an article to me, and it said, the exhausted majority needs to commit themselves radically to the middle. I said, I'm utterly exhausted, and I believe in this radical middle, which meant that there has to be dialogue that would get people who would not necessarily talk to each other to start to talk to each other. The article talked about Josh Gottheimer, who's probably pretty close to here, right? He serves up here.
Yep.
See, your congressman?
District, yep.
Okay. So Josh started the Problem Solvers Caucus, and I saw in Congress and on the academic campus all these places committed to the radical middle, but no spiritual underpinning. So there's a very, very active left spiritually, a very active right, but who is there to undergird the radical middle? And I decided, hey, maybe we should start a movement.
So I'm going to jump around a little bit based on that, which is, what is a radical middle? And is it hard for you, and this is an unfair paradigm, when people make a spectrum and say reform is on one end and orthodoxy is on the other end, conservative in the middle, it's an unfair paradigm for you to champion a radical middle being a champion of Reform Judaism also.
I think what I hear in your question is that many people will associate Reform Judaism with a far left.
That is correct.
So some people will accuse me or other Reform rabbis of being simply a mouthpiece for the Democratic Party. I didn't realize that until I left to the Upper West Side, because there, everything was a mouthpiece for the Democratic Party. So when I got to New Jersey and I started to find, that there was a lot of diversity in opinion, it made me think. But let me just go back to the radical middle. Do you all know what happens when someone says you're a centrist, what that's a euphemism for? Anyone want to guess? For what? Wishy-washy. It could be, that's being kind, wishy-washy, or you're a wimp. Because it means you're not either this, you're not that. I actually think, it's self-serving to say this, but I think it's actually brave to say that no matter what my values are, you don't lose your values, I am still going to be open enough equally with the value of hearing the other side. So I actually think that is what's radical about it, is not that I'm going to say, golly gee, I'm going to give up half of who I am, you give up half of who you are, and we're going to sit down and sing Kumbaya together. No, it's different. I'm going to sit down and tell you deeply about who I am. I'm going to equally listen to you, and then maybe because of our evolution of spirit, we're going to find a way to be able to come to terms.
Okay, so you wrote in your book, Is this thing, okay, it goes on and off, okay. You wrote in your book that in college, you started to come to grips with the idea that really most of the world are different shades of gray, and that there are few red lines in the world. To me, those red lines seem to be changing. I'm curious for you what those red lines are.
Well, the red line for me, let's just start, we're sitting in a shul, is Israel. So I know you and I, one of the bonds we have are that no one travels to Israel in this state more than Kirshner and Gewirtz. Like, you know, I mean, I would go 5 times a year. I think you probably do go 5 times a year. But no, but we really, and it's not just Zionism, it's not just Jewish identity. I'm sure what all of you have gotten from going with Rabbi Kirshner that our people get is an utter commitment to each other. You get locked in a bus for 10 days to Israel, Portugal, wherever you go. And
food. They come with me for food.
We enjoy the food also. So the red line is, I will get into something with someone about Israel, and the first question I'll ask is, do you believe that Jews deserve a homeland geographically where it's located in the Middle East? If they say no, that's a red line. That's no longer, the book says brave space, that's not brave. That's existentially threatening. If you say to me, yes, I do believe in it, and I believe in a Palestinian state, and I want to critique the way the current government works, we could have a conversation. But the red line is it cannot be existentially threatening to my homeland, to my body, to this democracy, to my family, to my shul, etc. So that's where the red line is. Otherwise, I think anything's open for conversation.
What about in the world of politics there?
Well, I mean, which one do you want to choose? So immigration was the one where I'm driving home from Connecticut from seeing my father-in-law, my wife, myself, our 3 kids. The Muslim ban is put forth, and immediately and instinctively go to the airport. We go to the airport, we protest. By the time I get home, I am slammed on social media by both sides. People not from my congregation are telling me that I am the stepson of Osama bin Laden. I mean, and I know you've faced horrible social media. I forgot which conflict it was, but you had people outside the shul, if I remember here.
Most times it's just Shabbat. That's the conflict.
Just on Shabbat, right? So, but the point is that, well, that's one that's fraught. So I've sat down with people and said, if you can agree on compassion, I can agree on security. So I could take I could go through each political issue. So yes, I talk about political issues openly, but not about which way you vote, but what the value is that we support.
So let me take 2 steps back based on that.
Yep.
You used the title in this book to build a brave space. You didn't call it to build a safe space.
Nope.
And to do that is incredibly brave, but also, to be fair, it's incredibly exhausting, which was kind of what led you to this process in the first place. Because to get into that level of conversation with people, you really have to be nuanced, you have to be thoughtful, you have to create space and time. Some people might say that doing that as a spiritual first responder, that's just the job of a rabbi, but you coined it something differently. You coined it a spiritual first responder. Can you talk about the difference between being a spiritual first responder in these moments versus the classic role of a rabbi?
Yeah, so let's do A and B. A and B is the difference between brave and brave and safe. Safe, of course, is what we want. I hope this sanctuary is a sanctuary in all its definitions, a safe space. But in this day and age, what I have a problem with, and you talked about Rabbi Karen Perlman, who's my senior associate. We have another Rabbi, Leah Sternberg, who's just turned 30. We hired her at 26. By the way, the first rabbi who's young enough that I could be her father. It was a really, really scary experience. So Leah said to me, the problem with my generation, she says, is that whenever we're uncomfortable in a conversation, we say, safe space, and the conversation's over. And I went to college during a time where my professors intentionally made me feel uncomfortable. I never knew which side they represented. I just knew that they were going to take a contrarian opinion to make sure that in that specific class, I was going to grow and evolve as deeply as I could, and that took being unsafe in that place. A little bit unsafe. But brave means that you don't get to withdraw from a conversation. And you can, again, existentially threatening, unsafe, get out. But if it's going to make you feel uncomfortable just because it's something you don't agree with, then you need to intentionally hang in there. That's A. The B is a spiritual first responder. I was 4 years into my rabbinate on the Upper West Side when 9/11 happened. So I didn't know what any of that meant. until I'm on the treadmill coming up with probably the worst Rosh Hashanah sermon that I was ever going to write, which of course I ended up not writing. And on the treadmill, I see a tiny little, what looks like a twin-engine plane hit the Twin Towers. Janet Huff is reporting from Midtown, so that's all you could see. And then by the time I get upstairs, I realize what's happened. My wife Lauren is down there. It's not like we have the internet that we have today. We had it, but we all report to my senior rabbi's office, and he takes out the list, and he says, we had 40 families at the Twin Towers working, and he said, you take 10, you take 10, you take 10. And like a responder, we went from home to home to home to be able to see what was going on with each of those families. It's the first time I had the sense that we're just not on call, but we have to respond in ways during crisis or during joy that very much feels like someone like Hatzalah getting a call and showing up. Thank God I don't deal with the blood part, but we do deal with the soul.
First of all, kol hakavod for coining it that way, because I think what makes it, what I glean from the book and you writing it that way is that a rabbi is a title we earn after years of study, but all of us have the ability and capability to become spiritual first responders, and it's a great way to share and infect positively with others that ability to make that difference. So I love that title. In this book, you did something else that was really powerful to me and quite raw, and that is you spoke about yourself. You were very open, naked. You shared about things that were a challenge for you. You talked about your parents' divorce. You talked about fear of intimacy, all these other things that were, in a generation ago, would have been totally taboo to discuss as a rabbi, because generations before us, rabbis who you worked for, who I worked for and with, they would say, you put up a wall around you. You don't share your life with the community. You don't share those things with them. You have to be a persona and a persona only. You've done just the opposite here. You have said to everybody, I am like you. Tell me about taking down that wall and what that's been like for you, and if you've had any sting from it, and if you've had any glory from it.
When I was a kid, I always knew when someone wasn't being completely open or themselves, and I always wanted to know what was underneath. And when I meet with wedding couples, I always start by giving them a few sort of headlines. And one of them is, I tell them facetiously, I don't do generic weddings well. And it doesn't mean I wouldn't do it, but I don't do them well. And I'm not there to bear the soul of the couple. But as a kid, I always remembered when a rabbi, a priest, a minister did not know a couple, and it turned me off even as a kid. And I thought to myself, when it came to this time when I thought I wanted to become a rabbi, that I was always going to try to be as authentic as I could. And then the question is, in that authenticity, how much do you open up? And I had a mentor who once said, when you cross the line and the sermon or the book is only about yourself, for the good of yourself, and only for the merit of yourself, you're not doing any good. You're just a nice guy. If you're taking that information to be able to make an ethical imperative, an ethical point to move people, and that comes from the rawness of yourself, that's when it's effective. So by the way, I don't always hit the mark. And there are people, I had a past president who used to say, we love Gewirtz and we can't stand Gewirtz for the same reason, because he's always himself, but you're never going to get a fake version. So my congregation always knows, again, agree or disagree, that there's an authenticity and, God willing, an integrity that comes along with it. So I've had one person who came to see me, and she said, you misread what happened here 10 years ago. I'm really offended. That's not how it went. And it's the way that I saw it. And there are moments that are very painful, and others are like, wow, we thought we knew everything about you. Thank you so much for, once again, even taking more of yourself. And what I hope that happens by it is that others will be more vulnerable as well.
What I love about that, Rabbi, is that when you talked about how you're only able to be a rabbi who can authentically know the couple, think about what the couple says about standing under the chuppah with the
yeah.
They know who you are and what makes you tick, and about them. I think that's similar. I want to dive into that just one more layer on something that is where the shoe pinches for me these days. So your mom, a blessed memory, her name was Tabitha. My mom, a blessed memory, her name was Barbara. We might as well call them both Mary, because both of them thought their sons were Jesus. And your mom and my mom were probably cut from the same cloth. I remember reading so many pieces about your mom and the way she saw you and how you could do no wrong and always called you Bubala. And I had a mom who was very similar. I'm in the early stages of mourning the loss of my mom. Came unexpectedly, and my heart is still very, very tender and raw. And I want to talk to you about you in the same way who modeled for your community and congregation what it was to grieve. You lost both your parents at your shul. Yeah. What it was to grieve in front of your shul and to be that level of vulnerable in front of them, and how they responded, and what you think that infuses and teaches for your community.
Yeah, so thank you, and your mom's memory should only be for a blessing. My mother also was somewhat unexpectedly, and was only 68, so when someone dies that young, she only would have been 80 now, so you still go through this. I used to watch my father at his siblings' kids' weddings, and he'd look at them and say, "Mama still could have been here." And that was a regular line. And now I understand when I've gone through all three of my kids' b'nai mitzvah and all these other milestones, and I think my mother could still be here. And my dad died at 91, so he would have been he probably wouldn't have been here. So there's something that happens differently in that regard. The first thing is that I needed to separate. The synagogue really gave me that full week just to be completely away. And then they saw a side of me that I think scared them. The funeral was not at B'nai Jeshurun. It was back at Road of Shalom, because I had just left there a few years earlier, where I had family there. But many of them came, and they saw a broken man. I was broken, and I didn't know what to do with myself for a while. So a couple of things happened. One is that I had a really wise president who called me about 2 weeks after, and he said, "I'm not sure what to do here." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "I don't know if you're ready to talk synagogue again, talk shul. And I have a list here, but I don't know what the boundary is." And I said to him, A, thank you so much for asking me, and B, I need so badly as therapy to be a rabbi again. Because what happens is you're so disoriented, you're not sure who you are as father, you're not sure who you are as husband, you're not sure who you are as son who's mourning, but I knew I was as rabbi. And that ability for him to help bring me back was extraordinary. The next thing, and I'll say this because this is not my pulpit, and I don't think anyone from my congregation is here, something that's very hard to say in front of your own congregation that I'm not going to ask you to say, but I'll say on our behalf, is that what I realized people needed was not just for me to be okay for me. They needed me to be okay for them. Because they were scared that me, who often acted as their anchor in life, was so shaky that I wouldn't be able to officiate in their moments of greatest joy or greatest pain. And it was really important for them to help nurse me back to health, not just for me, but for the congregation. And the reason I don't say that there is because I never want them to feel badly. I'm their rabbi. We're here for you. But what happens when the person who's there for you is not sure if they know how to be there for themselves? And that was sort of a symbiotic way of me healing for me, but also me for them. And there's some loneliness that comes with that, because ultimately you're saying, wow, I'm getting better so I can take care of people. Am I going to have the time to really take care of myself? And as you'll see, unfortunately, the crack doesn't go away for a very long time, and I think you know that anyway.
I think that's very wise counsel on this. I want to change gears a little bit. You spend all of your waking moments thinking about the future of the Jewish world. I know that. You do that for two reasons. One, because you're a Mets and Jets fan and you have nothing else to think about when you root for those teams. You can't think about the Super Bowl or the World Series, so you might as well think about the Jews. The second reason you do that is because you are a radical centrist and you are a globalist. What's very interesting is I know you are a pioneer. You are a person who is so respected in the Reform movement. But every time I spend time with you and every time I talk to people about you, you're thinking about global Judaism. So talk to me a little bit about where you think we are globally as a Jewish world and where you think we're going as a Jewish world. What are the key ingredients in a post-COVID world for what we have to bring and what we have to offer?
You know, what's interesting is, he's an empathic guy generally, right? He's a sensitive guy. He's there for you. He loves you. Now, as a Met and Jet fan, you know how my life has been replete with suffering. And he's just sitting here pounding it into me. And it's, it just doesn't really match the empathy that I've always known of the rabbi. So yes, it's
a poor decision-making process.
Listen, you're born into these things. Except my son did leave and became a Yankees fan. So there's some wise in there. On one hand, we are in really big trouble, and this synagogue, and thank God my synagogue, is the rule that proves the exception. If you're putting it backwards, meaning that 20% of shuls are closing. Membership is declining. When I was ordained, affiliation in America with Gewirtz synagogues was 60%. Now, 26 years later, it's down to 29%. It's a very, very serious problem. And we can do what we like to do in this country, is become hysterical, and we could light our hair on fire, or we could continue to study and read more deeply into the numbers. If you ask how many Jews are proudly identified as Jews, it's 94%. If you ask how many people put a mezuzah up on their home, it's 78%. Passover is 74%. Fasting Yom Kippur is like 69%. That means that people are clearly connected to their Judaism, clearly seeking spirituality. By the way, the God number in this country is like 92%. If you call it a higher power, we are probably more attached to God in America than the religious South American countries are. We just don't talk about it. So, if you light your hair on fire, you just run and you do nothing well because you say, oh my God, if I could only do what I did 20 years ago better, then everything will be fine, which is what half of our colleagues do. Or you could say, 94% proud to be Jewish, 29% affiliation rate, maybe the synagogue has something that they are not doing correctly to be able to attract the voraciously ravenous spiritual seeker, which there are plenty of. So, as my friend Brad Hirschfield says, it's like taking a vegetarian to Peter Luger's. Like, people are hungry as heck, but they ain't ordering anything there because they don't eat meat. Probably you should use a kosher example, but the point is, so might it be that the synagogue has to figure out a different menu that we offer to people so they can find the meaning, the purpose, and the existence that they're seeking, and it turns out that we have thousands of years of wisdom that would be frittered away if we don't find a way to offer it. So I think, and we're part of this group, we are trying to find a paradigm shift. Because when I hand over the keys to B'nai Jeshurun to my successor, God willing, that's not for a while still, I don't want to hand it off to say, we've just kept above water. I want to say, here's the paradigm. We're going to disrupt from within the legacy. You're 94 years old. We're turning 175 next year. We're really old. The question is, we know brand new synagogues who are hip and cool on the Upper West Side can start and make something. Sharon Brous did it out in LA. David Ingbar did it in New York, etc. But can we do what Uber did to taxis, what Airbnb did to Marriott, what Netflix did to Blockbuster, from within the organization, so that we don't watch something open up out there, we become different in here?
And can those synagogues keep that momentum in those years to come? Right, that's great. Look, I think you proved me correct as I came up and introduced you today. And what you see here in the energy, the thoughtfulness, the creativity, but also the grounded in reality is what you're going to find in this. It's a very compelling read, and it's a read of a real story that tells you not only Rabbi Gewirtz's life, but ways that you can incorporate some of this into your life. You can get on Amazon, you can get on Barnes & Noble, and I'll tell you another way you can get it. We bought a lot of these copies of these books to celebrate you, and we've decided that since we were having trouble with Minyan during the week, and so many people raised their hand and said, Hineni, here I am, I'm going to come to Minyan 1 day a week, 2 days a week, and we've been having great Minyanim. That doesn't mean stop coming, by the way. As one of our many thank yous, we sent a copy to all of our Minyonaires, a copy of this book that we hope they'll enjoy. And if you're not in there, you can do one of two things. You can start coming to Minyan and get it, or you can go to Amazon after Shabbos or Barnes & Noble or wherever you get books, Kindle, and get this. I promise you, you will enjoy the read. Rabbi, Matt, it is an honor to have you on our Bima. I hope it's the first of many, many more times. And most importantly, I hope that you, Lauren, and your children are continued to be blessed with health and goodness and wisdom to touch as many hearts and souls for good as I know you have and will continue to do, because when you do, our world becomes a better place.
Thank you so much for your hospitality. It means so much to me.